Good morning, everybody. We're very happy to be with you today and talk about the importance of early engagement with patient advocacy groups. My name is Barbara Webbles, and I head up the patient advocacy effort at Audentes Therapeutics. And Audentes is a new company. We're not even 2 years old yet. We'll be 2 years old next month. So we're a biotech startup in downtown San Francisco. Our CEO, Matt Patterson, is very committed to the role of patient advocacy. And an interesting note on that is I am actually the second employee of the company after Matt. So I was there from the very beginning. The role of patient advocacy is to bring the voice of patients to the company and the voice of the company to the patients so that we're all aware of each other's actions and reactions, and there's not a lot of surprises anywhere along the journey. We have created a unique patient advocacy website that I would encourage you to look at. The children of all of the people that are presenting today are unable to speak. 3 of them are trached and vented. 1 we have sadly lost already. So they cannot speak. So on our website, we have told the story of 6 children to give voice to their condition and to give voice to their families and what they have to deal with. So I would encourage you to go there and check that out. We have 4 panelists joining us today. On my far left is Allison Rocket Fraze, who founded the Joshua Fraze Foundation about 20 years ago. Next to her is Erin Ward, who created the myotubular myopathy, central nuclear myopathy family connection. And next to her is Holger Fischer, who is here from Stuttgart, Germany, to share his story with us. On videotape, our second speaker will be Anne Lennox, who founded the Myotubular Trust in the UK. Anne's daughter's having surgery this weekend, so she was unable to join us. So we'll begin with Allison, and Allison will be happy to share for a few minutes the story of Joshua Fraze and the foundation.
It is an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you. My name is Allison Fraze, and I'm a mother and a patient advocate.
Here's the advancer.
Thank you. I advocated on behalf of our late son Joshua for nearly 16 years. In the last 4 years, I've been advocating on behalf of his peers. Today, we are on the cusp of clinical trials, but that does not happen without solid research, 20 years of solid research by many, and a single-minded vision towards a cure. Like many of you here today, our journey began with a child diagnosed with a rare disease. I would love to talk about Joshua in all the early years, but I only have 8 minutes. What I would like to talk to you about is a pivotal moment in our research. When Joshua was born 2 decades ago, little was known about MTM in the world. We started our foundation in 1996 with the purpose of raising money to initiate and support research. And within a year, we had started a team of scientists at Harvard working on regenerative medicine and genetics. They began by understanding the pathology of MTM. 10 years into our research, one of our scientists was collaborating with a group in France and started working on gene replacement therapy on our mice colony. And 2.5 years later, we knew that we were ready for a large animal model. If you've heard our story before, you've heard a lot about a dog named Nibs, but Nibs wasn't our first dog. She was our second. When we received news about Trixie, whose litter was displaying possible symptoms of being affected with MTM, we devised a plan on how to retrieve Trixie. My researchers and I were emailing back and forth on who would take the lead on how to approach this dog's owner, but because our email contained the word bitch, the appropriate name for a female dog, it was blocked by institutional servers. And before we knew it, our window of opportunity was closed, and the owner had Trixie spayed. So we were right back to where we started with no large animal model. I was devastated, to say the least. My husband, Paul, reminded me it was very uncharacteristic of me to give up the lead on anything. And he said that I needed to get on the next plane when and if we found another animal. And I truly agreed. He reminded me of my never take no mentality. that he often blames comes from my New York upbringing. Through this whole process, I had befriended a veterinarian in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, that's a tongue twister, who 1 month later contacted me with a potential lead. She started calling all over Canada, leaving messages with relatives of the first dog, Trixie. And she called me back with a number of a cowboy in the middle of Canada who had a dog who was possibly producing puppies with wasting puppy syndrome. I called, it was a week before Christmas, I called this cowboy, a desperate mother in Florida calls this random cowboy in the middle of Canada to ask for help. And I shared our story, I introduced ourselves, I talked about our son, I talked about our research and success we were having with the mouse colony. And I told him that we would never get from a mouse to a human without a large animal model. And I told him that we thought that his dog was a possible carrier. I'm sure he heard the desperation in my voice, as we knew that we were racing against the clock, and our son's health was declining. And so within 5 minutes, this random Canadian cowboy said, "I want to help your son. I want to give you my dog." I was overcome with a flood of emotions, to say the least. So I got off the phone and I booked my flight. I arrived at the airport in Saskatchewan 2 days after Christmas in the middle of winter storms. After 4 airlines and 10 ticket changes, I arrived with no luggage, no crate to transport nibs. So Vic, my cowboy, and his wife and I went to mad dash to a pet store to buy the necessary equipment for Nibs to transport her. And within 15 hours, I was back on a flight, outrunning a blizzard, to meet my researchers in North Carolina, who was waiting on our arrival. It wouldn't be fair of me to tell you the story about Nibs without telling you a little bit about her. And if you can see on the screen, she was a beautiful, strong chocolate lab, but she was no ordinary dog. There have been many times along this journey that I've had the distinct impression that I was exactly where I needed to be, exactly at that right time, and this was one of them. She knew, I don't know how she knew, but she knew she carried the same gene. This gene that I had wrestled with in the moment that my son took his first breath. Nib sensed her importance in my life, and she walked through that transition into our lives with purpose. It was important for me that Nibs maintain somewhat of her Saskatoon lifestyle, so I paid a breeder to keep her on their farm close to our researchers so she could run the hills of Virginia. 4 months later, she gave birth to her last litter. It was 12 puppies in all. Out of the 4 males, there was 1 that was affected with MTM. And out of the 8 females, 5 were carriers. And just like that, we had the first and only large animal colony in the world. And what we were seeing in the 1 affected puppy, we were seeing in the mice. And we knew right then and there that we were onto something potentially life-changing. I received numerous emails from researchers from all over the world, and you could hear the excitement in their words because they knew what this would do to the MTM studies. We've been working on this colony for 7 years, and if you'll direct your attention to the screen, you'll see a video from one of our researchers showing a wild, how do I hit play?
She'll help you.
Showing a wild type, which is an unaffected dog, an untreated dog, bottom right, bottom left.
Yep.
You'll see an untreated dog, and you'll see a few dogs have received only 1 injection of gene replacement therapy.
Instead of walking.
He's a sweetie though. Yeah, she is a look at her. Hi, Cloudy. Hi.
So as you see, that was like a 4-month-old dog. An untreated affected MTM pups don't live past 17 weeks. It's our treated dog, 1 injection.
Here. Rush, easy. Easy. Here.
These last two dogs are Pavlov and Turing. They're my stud dogs now. And they just celebrated their 3-year anniversary of one injection of gene replacement therapy, and their histology has normalized. Every time I see this video, I have to hold back the tears. I watch this and I think of all the children around the world that struggle with this disorder every day. And I think about our babies in the NICU unit, and I think about all the children that we have lost, my son included. Which leads me to the second pivotal piece of our efforts that I want to talk to you about. A few years ago, I'm at the tail end right now. A few years ago, I knew the data we were collecting in the dog colony would lead us to clinical trials, and I knew our database was inadequate. Where's our population? Where's our families? How do we contact them? So I knew a patient registry would be of great purpose for preparation of clinical trials. I started meeting with law firms also. I wanted to wrap IP around this to make it more enticing to VC. And after 4 law firms, 16 hours of conversations, a team of attorneys here, and a team that one of the French researchers had hired, I had figured out the IP. I also simultaneously launched an international patient registry to capture our CNM and MTM community from around the world. This registry has already served a great purpose and continues to do so as we move towards clinical trials for MTM, but also to learn more about the other central nuclear myopathies. During this whirlwind of events, my husband contacted our Matt Pattison, now CEO of Dentist Therapeutics, to pitch to him our large animal model research. The dog model and the International Patient Registry are serving of great purpose to our dentists. And as they move towards orphan drug development and clinical trial design, in conclusion, I want to encourage you to never lose sight of hope when you're out there advocating on behalf of a loved one. Race with that, with everything in you. Start with the end in mind. There will be years of seemingly insignificant steps, but it will lead you to a moment that could change the course of research.
Allison is being honored later today for her work with patient advocacy. She's getting the Patient Advocacy Award. So the next person we're going to hear from is Anne Lennox, who's appearing via videotape from London. And the interviewer is a gentleman by the name of John Clare, who worked at the BBC for many years and has done a lot of work with us in facilitating patient groups. Okay. So before you start that, we held our very first patient focus group in London.
So, Anne, can you tell me first of all, what happened to your son, Tom?
My son Tom was born in 2003, and it was clear from the moment of his birth that he was very fragile, and we learnt within a few weeks that he had myotubular myopathy.
And had you heard about myotubular myopathy at the time?
No, and most families that we meet who get a diagnosis of myotubular myopathy have never heard of it, and in fact most hospitals, when you turn up in an A&E environment in AR, people have no idea what the condition is either, so we realised it was very rare.
But you were lucky, weren't you, in that sense, that the doctor in charge of him, who knew what it was?
Well, we were lucky that somebody we knew was able to get us referred very quickly to the neuromuscular centre led by Professor Francesco Montoni, and he very quickly could tell, just even by looking at Tom, that he had a neuromuscular condition. Otherwise, we may have been waiting months for diagnosis. We were just lucky that someone was able to short-circuit that.
And what happened after that with Tom, and how did it progress?
Tom wasn't ventilated, but he did struggle with breathing, and he particularly struggled with swallowing, and that was probably the worst part of the condition for him. By the time he died at nearly 4, he was all able to sit up, he could talk, he could sign language to catch up with his talking, but he couldn't swallow very well, and it was eventually not being able to swallow that caused him to have a major airway blockage, and that's how he died in the end. unlike some of the other children who die of respiratory failure, he died just from a simple, what you'd call an accident, really.
Now that led you to setting up the MyTubular Trust, is that correct?
Well, I would say setting up the MyTubular Trust was quite independent of Tom's life, because we didn't imagine that we were somehow going to find a cure so quickly that we would save our son's life. We set up the MyTubular Trust because we happened to be lucky enough to live in London with fantastic experts in the field, and the consultant who looked after Tom, Professor Francesco Montoni, was heading the Neuromuscular Centre of Expertise at the time, and we just became aware of what was happening at the time in neuromuscular disease.
So tell me about your relationship with Audentes.
Our relationship with Audentes goes back to before they were called Audentes. Matthew Patterson came to see me at one point when they were developing the proposition to develop a gene therapy for myotubule myopathy. So before they'd even created the company, Matthew Patterson was out and about talking to patients and patient organisations and trying to get a handle on, before they went down the road looking for investors for this, what the patient community were feeling.
And what did you do for them at the start?
I think we just give them an insight into what mattered. If you're looking at any condition from the outside, whether you're an investor or a biotech or even a medic, you imagine certain things matter. But when you're living with it, funnily enough, other things matter. And I think that was it. That was a helpful conversation for them, and it was a helpful conversation for us.
And then I think you were involved in recruiting patients or asking patients, did they want to take part in an advisory board?
Yes, actually, in the UK we called it a focus group, because that works very well for in UK groups. And we had a long conversation with Audentes. We didn't do this quickly. We talked it backwards and forwards between us to work out what would be the best way to make a group like that work. And they were very open to the idea that rather than, for example, calling it an advisory board, they would call it a focus group, which would work here. So they were very aware of how to listen to hear how to make something culturally appropriate. And so we just worked through what would it look like, what would be an agenda that would work here, what would be the kind of questions that families would want to ask and answer. And we developed it over a period of months together.
What do you think that families, mytubular myopathy families, got out of that and out of your relationship with Audentes?
I think what they got out of the focus group was a chance to ask questions openly, easily, get answers, and not be presented to, which often can happen to families. They get presented to, and often get presented to after the fact. They could tell that Audentes were in a development phase, and so they were interested rather than just presenting information. And so I think they felt they were able to ask questions at an important time. I think also it allowed Audentes to see how patients reacted to living with the condition, and what that would mean at the point of clinical trials. Even just travelling to a hospital when you've got a child with that much vulnerability is quite a big issue, and they were able to tease that kind of information out.
Now, you said earlier that Matthew, the founder, approached you quite early on.
Yeah.
How important is it for pharmaceutical companies or biotechs to get involved early on with patient support groups?
I think it makes a great difference, because you're travelling the road together and you understand where each other is coming from. I realise it's not always realistic, that's not always going to happen. But if a patient organisation meets a company like Audentes early, then they can feel part of the story rather than being at the receiving end of something. And people do suffer from the not invented here syndrome. If people are part of the inventing of something, even if it's only a tiny part really, I think it makes them feel that they have confidence in it. That would be my feeling.
I know that sometimes people would think it's a bit of a risk getting involved with the drug company, essentially.
You mean a patient organisation would think, yeah, and of course it should be. It should be a risk, and you should have your antenna up and out and aware all the time. As soon as you begin to take everything at face value, then you're no longer listening on behalf of patients. And I think any company like our dentist that expected you to just listen to everything would be making a mistake, because by hearing each other out along the way, it means you might pick up on issues that could become a big problem later on in a clinical trial. So I think everybody should be aware of the risks, and I think everybody should be aware and happy and confident about the fact that we all have different objectives. We have shared objectives, but we also have different objectives, and there's nothing wrong with that. And some of the objectives of the commercial world are to make money. And the reason they're going to make money is because they're going to find a cure for your child or your condition. And there's nothing wrong with that either. But everybody has to be aware that they're coming at it with a set of objectives that sometimes cross over and sometimes don't.
And what would your advice be to both sides of that equation, if you like, to the other patient support groups who are perhaps approached by drug companies? What would you say to them?
I think the most important thing is to keep lines of communication open and to try to be honest all the time, honest about your concerns, honest about what you want, honest about your needs. And I think a big risk is for either party to be over presenting themselves to each other. If you try to keep lines of communication open all the way and share concerns and share objectives, then I think the outcome not only will be better, but I think it'll happen faster. That's my feeling.
Okay, so that was Ann Lennox. And next we're going to hear from Erin Ward. Erin founded the Myotubular Myopathy, Central Nuclear Myopathy Patient Connection, and they have been hosting the biannual patient family meetings for the last 8 years. They had a wonderful conference in Chicago this summer that we were all at, and along with a couple of hundred other people. And I'll let Erin tell her story.
Thank you, Barbara. And I'm pleased to be here. I thank Global Genes for this fantastic summit and Barbara for inviting us to be part of this panel today. And our theme of the conference this summer was Anchors and Oars, Strength for Today and Hope for Tomorrow. And playing on that analogy, I feel so utterly blessed to be part of just one organization in this mighty fleet, and everything that Allison and Holger have done, and many others. There's another mom in the room, Melanie Whiston, who also has an organization that raises money. Where there's a will, there's a cure, for MTM. So for being such a rare disease, we are incredibly blessed to have so many different organizations working on behalf of our kids. So what brings me to this community is the birth of my son back in 2001. And we actually had a fairly unusually, I guess looking back on it and hearing many people's stories, a fairly quick diagnosis. We were at Children's Hospital Boston and through a muscle biopsy at 4 weeks, and then later genetic confirmation, we found out that William had myotubular myopathy. And one of the lead researchers in the world researching this with the support of JFF is Dr. Alan Beggs, and he was able to come to our bedside and relay more quickly information for us than most likely others. So we're grateful for that. Will has kind of an advanced form, or kind of more, there's kind of a range in the spectrum, and for Will, he does require the support of a trach and a ventilator. And he actually does quite well with it. He just started high school and is fully integrated in our high school. And we are incredibly hopeful that in his lifetime there may be a cure or treatments. 15 years ago, that just felt so far reached, but here we are today with the help of a dentist and many others on that verge. I'd just like to acknowledge that our organization is a very grassroots effort based with many support of many families, and here's our leadership team, Marie Wood, who lives in New York. She has 2 children, Paley and Reed, who are affected by MTM, and Shannon Mishinchi, who has Javad, and also my husband, Mark, there with our family. So we have quite an evolution of the conference. It came out of a grassroots effort of families recognizing the need to get together with each other, but also how wonderful it would be to be able to meet face-to-face with medical professionals. So we had our first conference in 2009 in Texas. The next one in 2011, and you'll see in each photo, it grows a little bit bigger and bigger. 2013, at this point, we were probably at about 30 families, which is pretty extraordinary for our rare disease, but also the level of complexity of our kids and what it takes for families to travel. And here we are, we need a wider lens, I think, for the next conference, because we had about 200 people attend and representation from 50 families. The other wonderful, unique thing was in 2013 was our first year that we had pharma industry engaged at the conferences. This is our mission statement. We focus on research, resources, and relationships. For research, we did not found our organization to sponsor money for research that was already being done really well by all these other organizations in our community. So our efforts focus on bringing families together with researchers so researchers can learn about the disease and how it affects families. Families have a chance to share their stories. And also, something unique is that we provide an opportunity for families to enroll in trials. Right now, it's not trials, but registries, different observational studies on site. The other thing, you can just take a look at some of the resources and the ways that we promote relationships. Our newest one being, I have them right here in the front of the room, we have created this concept of having a mascot where our community has named him Mayo, the traveling turtle. He has his own Facebook group page. It's kind of a nice concept for you to be thinking about. It's a way that families can stay connected. And also, he'll be traveling and visiting research labs as well as pharma industry. And coming up, one of the team members of Adentis will be taking him to the World Society Muscle Conference coming up in the UK. So it's a great way to share information and for everyone to stay connected. So here we are. It's been a incredible journey, and also to understand that not only a company was coming into play for our community, but a company that has patient engagement at the forefront of their mind. Matt Patterson, 2 weeks after the company Adentis became public, he attended our 2013 conference and had made that announcement in person to families. Since that time, we also have helped to relay communications and announcements for the company. We've helped to identify potential family members for focus groups. And also we met early, our team met early with Barbara, planning ahead for the 2015 conference. Just go back there for a minute. So financially, Adentis was one of our elite sponsors, incredibly helpful in putting on the conference. Like Barbara mentioned, the entire team was present and engaging with the family members, providing updates and research so they could hear it directly from them. Also, if you have a chance to visit the Adentis Patient Advocacy website, the work of Levi Gershowitz from Living in the Light is absolutely extraordinary. And with their support, Levi attended our conference to be able to engage with families, help tell their story, and take beautiful photography. So I mentioned to you that at our conference, we have had an opportunity to help researchers gather data and observational studies. And this year, we helped to facilitate that with Adentis, with a team from Cincinnati Children's Hospital, with trying to figure out how are we going to capture endpoints for this very unique population where there's not studies and tests for measurement that may work. So about 25 families or children were able to participate in that. And I think it saves everybody time and moves the process forward, because the time and money that it would have cost for the company to support travel to go visit all of these families and track them down would have been extraordinary. And then just general things, having a chance to hear the stories and foster community. So just some vague, not vague, but highlights that maybe you can carry with you to your own organization and thinking about early engagement. I love the slogan, "Nothing about me without me." It's a very patient-centered care type of philosophy. There's such value in meeting and identifying patients early. And also creating communication systems when the type of communication being transferred is a little bit lower level or not the high value risk communication that's going to be happening further down the road. So testing out communication systems. And of course, most importantly, identifying what the patient and family priorities are. And this is a term that I really value. When we were thinking about engaging with industry in 2013, I think we had some reservation. You know, how would this work at a conference with families? Will they come in and try to take over? All of these things that I think it's important to think about. So what we've learned is that it has been incredibly powerful, helpful, that families have been receptive to it and been excited about it. So communicate early and openly, have honest conversations about the potential challenges, and also you have a chance to share what you're thinking about from a patient and family perspective in terms of the logistics of how this is going to work, and then having a chance to hear what the needs are for the company. So I just share with you a few of the beautiful photos that Levi took, and also share our contact information. We are more than happy to share the model that we use for gathering our patients and families, something that I think that works well. And I thank you for your time.
Okay, Holger, you're up. Thanks, Erin. Holger is our final speaker. Holger is here from Stuttgart, Germany. And this is a wonderful illustration of how you open a door just a tiny bit and let somebody in, and they continue walking through the door and are now changing the world in Europe. This man's amazing.
Thank you. Speaking after Alison and Anne and Erin is making me feeling like a dwarf, but sitting on shoulders of giants. And so we are all able to look further together. So I'm just about to tell you a short story about our small new founded organization on central nuclear myopathies that is called in English CNN Together Strong. But first, the reason why I'm here is this little guy there. My son Emil is right now 19 months old, and we were also quite fast in getting a diagnosis with 4 months on MTM, myotubular myopathy. It took another 2 months to get home because Emil needs, because he has a trach and because he has a PEG tube, 24/7 nurses. But so from the time there, we are at home without any severe problems. He likes trees. He likes to go in the park with us. So you can see also my wife, Jennifer, there. So it's okay. it's more than okay. We are very happy to have him and to be together. Nevertheless, like the point when we got the diagnosis, I was in a black hole. And it was just my wife who kept like looking, Googling in the internet. And she told me, look, there's this myotubular trust, and they even have their meeting like just 6 weeks ahead. You have to go. So I went there, or better, I registered, and I got immediately from Anne an email. Look, nice that you come, but could you come a day earlier? There's this focus group meeting she mentioned already. So I said, yes, why not? And so I got there without really knowing what the focus group was about, and not so much knowing about gene therapy and knowing about this enterprise Audente Therapeutics. But I had a lot of questions, and all these questions were answered, and I got more and more into what the research was behind, and I got more and more confident that there is really some substantial potential for success in this, what Audentes is doing. The other day then, when the real research conference started, there was even more about it. I was like really inspired by what's going on. It's like I keep saying from this time, there's almost as many researchers going for MTM as there's patients, and that made me very, very happy and very doing stuff right now. So you can see here that's Anne in the center and Mel and Wendy, the other strong ladies of the Myotubular Trust. Yeah, just skip. So coming back to Germany, we saw that there was already something going on, but it was just family meetings, family get-togethers, better said to say. So together with another family who attended the London conference, we set up just like some small web page. Oh, lacking something anyway. to have researchers invited, and we called basically the ones that were at the London conference. And one of the first calls or emails I wrote was to Barbara, and I asked them whether they also wanted to participate in this meeting, and they said yes, of course. So that also inspired already just announcing that there was an enterprise attending at our conference, inspired so many German families who were quite reluctant to research. They were, oh, okay, there's an enterprise, that's really interesting, so we go. So at the beginning there was like 4 families, then I always kept the number. Oh, maybe we have 8, maybe we have 10. At the end, we had 23 families attending this conference, and it was like I was overwhelmed by the success. I never could have imagined it ever better. At the very evening of this conference, between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m., we wrote down a charter of our association. And so right now we have a logo, we have a name, and it's going on and going on. So we had a lot of paperwork to do to registering a charity. You can imagine in Germany we had a lot of forms to fill out, but we succeeded in this also. That's easy job, part of what you do normally. And it's going on. So Barbara wrote me another email. What about you attending the MTM CNM Family Conference in Chicago? And so that was another opportunity for us as an association to enroll a network and to get in contact with the other organizations, but also with the researchers. And that was another great experience. And on top of that, together with Arlene, a member of our association, we were even invited to the office and to the lab of Audentes Therapeutics in San Francisco. And we were able to tell people there, so Arlene lost her brother to MTM, and we were able to tell what is life with MTM and what is our expectations, what's our life. And that was also very good for us to see how Audentes is interested in what's our life, and that they get to know our situation, basically. But it's going on. So my wife is from Ecuador, and she said to me, look, there's no Facebook group in Spanish. We should start something with that. And so together with one of the leaders of the MTM CNM Family Connection, with Marie Wood, they founded a Spanish group on Facebook. And just like another time, inspiring people all over the Spanish-speaking world. So right now there's a family from Chile, as well as a boy from Venezuela, and of course Spanish families in this group, and thinking about like forming another association on MTM CNM. And another step, as Italian and Spanish are so alike languages, there's even right now we got into contact with a family in Rome that wants to do exactly the same. So it's going on. And we are happy to hand over the torch always to the next runner, so that we can have the Olympic stadium reached. So there's a small mistake there. Our next family meeting will be, of course, in 2016. We have already set a date, and we will work together with the Myotubular Trust to have a bilingual meeting, also to be accessible for people who don't speak German but English. And maybe that might be some European meeting in May. So it's going on. Just a brief summary what I have experienced from this engagement also together with Audentes. Oh, I forgot to say, Barbara will visit probably the hopefully founder of the Spanish group next week.
Right.
So we set also Audentes up with these newfound families. And that's a new kind of motivation you can give to families, especially those families who are frustrated by research, by doctors. If you say, look, there's a company, there's even people who think they can make money with finding the cure. They are so just steps away. That is a new quality of motivation you can give to families that are out of the reach of research. And also this exchange of information that helps, and that helps also then the families get into charge again, and also convincing doctors. There are sometimes these terrible decisions when doctors lose faith in future, and they recommend not to go on with a life. It's really important that families have hope and that they say, no, we stand for it. And that is also a possibility that you can say, look, we are on the threshold of something new, of real treatment. And of course, it's also a nice story to tell people who just are around you, your friends. You want to tell them about what's going on, and if you have this spark of hope, that there's even an enterprise engaged in this, it makes it far easier for families, for me at least, to talk about that. And I think it's absolutely okay to communicate openly, to have no fear about your worries. So we were telling a lot of problems we might have and we see, and it's okay to be on the same page and to see what we think we should have and what our dentists should have. That's helping each other. We ask a lot of questions and we get a lot of answers. So it's basically a very open and good relationship we have. And of course, the best recommendation I can give is always, it's our motto, together strong. So work together for the same objective. Go as long as possible the same way, that these two boys have a cure as soon as possible. Thank you.
So I hope you've been able to see from our experiences over the not quite 2 years how we have been able to engage with the patient community and how just planting little seeds here and there has made it all grow so well. So I would just encourage you, go out and do that with your own communities, with your companies, and it's better to light a candle than curse the darkness, right? And I think we've seen these people all light candles all over the world now. That will greatly change the future for children with myotubular myopathy. So thanks for coming. Any questions?
Don't be shy. So with the dogs, was it well known that, because I imagine it's probably pretty rare for canines too. I mean, how did you decide to go that route in terms of searching for dogs that exist in the community as opposed to making your own model and introducing the mutant?
Well, we were open to any large animal, in all honesty, but there was a researcher at the University of San Diego her lab is a clearinghouse for all dogs that have neuromuscular disorders. And she had met Alan Beggs from Boston Children's Hospital at a conference, and she said, I think I'm looking at myotubular myopathy under a slide that was sent to me from a veterinarian in Canada. So at this point in time, that's what, why we initiated. It was the first thing that came down our path. It was an arduous journey, but that's why we looked at the large animal model.
Vets all over the world have a network where they share abnormal animals too. There's a Tay-Sachs sheep, for instance, that was found because a rancher had these abnormal sheep. He took them to the vet and he said, something's the matter with them, I don't know what. The vet tested them, they had a form of Tay-Sachs. So that's how they got their large animal model. So it's a wonderful service that vets do provide.
It was all speculation, though, honestly. I mean, we were looking at, under a slide, it looked like myotubular myopathy, but there was no gene involvement for the canine model. And it wasn't until I brought Nibs back into the US and we did a cheek swab on her, and within 4 days, they had isolated the gene. So not only have we made tremendous strides for the neuromuscular world, we've actually isolated a gene for veterinarians and for breeders so they can breed that out of the colony, the colony. But,
yeah. Any other questions? Well, thank you all very much for coming. It was wonderful to have this opportunity to share with you.